I'm just asking you, if based on the numbers, more Germans died than Brits in World War II, did that mean that the British were wrong in World War II? Because they did. Many more Germans died than Brits. Based on the numbers, does that mean that Britain was wrong in World War II?
Britain wasn't bombing civilians. There's a clear difference.
You should talk to the people in Dresden, but you can't because they're dead.
So I just want to know, how hard was it to like generate like AI generated images of Hamas?
So you should take off your mask now. Not really because what you're saying is so anti-Semitic, but just because what you're saying is so unbelievably stupid that I hope employers take a good stock of a person who does something so dumb.
Ben Shapiro is the GOAT when it comes to debating, and we decided to compile all of his best moments against pro-Palestine advocates. Let's jump right into it. The first video is a video of him at Cambridge University against a feminist.
All right, thank you, and free Palestine.
Which part? Really? It's a serious question. What is it?
I'm not going to comment on that.
I mean, I saw you say from the river to the sea, so you can just say it out loud.
Yeah, from the river to the sea.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, I appreciate the idea that the Jewish state should be wiped completely off the map with the concomitant loss of life. But we're worried about climate change and the humanitarian aspects of climate change over the course of the next 100 years. Sure. Okay.
Unbelievable. And this went crazy viral on YouTube, where everybody was talking about this for about a month after the war on October 7th.
Hi. If Israel is justified in killing civilians because of the acts of terror committed by Hamas, why isn't Hamas justified in doing what it did? Because Israel is keeping 13,000 children. It has tried them in military courts. Since the establishment of Israel, 55,000 Palestinian homes have been bulldozed. So why isn't Hamas justified in doing what it did if we use your logic?
So I'm going to answer your question, then I'm going to ask you a question if you don't mind. Is that all right? So so my answer is that Israel would not be justified in killing Palestinian civilians because of the actions of terrorists. Israel would be justified in attempting to kill terrorists, and civilian casualties are a cost of war. That is just a reality of life. During World War II, there were 70,000 Brits who died during the Blitz bombing, and there were 2 million Germans who died, civilians who died during World War II. And I don't see a lot of monuments in Britain because of the 2 million civilians who died in Germany. The costs of war are brutal, they're terrible, they're horrifying. There's a vast difference in moral scope between deliberately going into a civilian area and murdering everyone you can find and trying to kill a terrorist who is deliberately hiding beneath a civilian area, hiding their rockets in civilian areas, starving their own people. There is a vast difference. Okay, so now I get to ask my question, if you don't mind. So my question is, do you believe that there is a moral difference between Hamas going into, for example, Kfar Aza and murdering entire families, and Israel attempting to target terrorists and accidentally hitting civilians?
Israel is effectively doing the same because Gaza is the most densely populated region in the world. There are 15,000 people per square mile.
So does Hamas get immunity because they're there? So Hamas gets immunity. So
Israel has killed 3,500 children in the past 3 weeks. That's more children. That's more children than have died in conflicts around the world in each of the last 4 years.
So just to be clear, your logic is that if you're a terrorist group located in a densely populated community and you hide behind civilians, you are now immune.
Where are the children meant to go?
So you're immune. Okay. That's a violation of the Geneva Conventions, but okay. You're now immune. Your logic is that if you're a Hamas terrorist...
Sorry, since 2005, 23 out of every 24 conflict deaths have been Palestinian. I don't see any moral equivalency there. It's clearly unjust what the IDF has been doing to the Palestinians because there's a vast disparity between the number of Palestinians being killed and the number of Israelis.
I mean, I would certainly hope that Israel is killing more Hamas
This isn't
members.
A conflict. This isn't a conflict. This is one-sided ethnic cleansing.
So, again, I'm just asking you, if based on the numbers, more Germans died than Brits in World War II, did that mean that the British were wrong in World War II? Because they did. Many more Germans died than Brits. Based on the numbers, does that mean that Britain was wrong in World War II?
Britain wasn't bombing civilians. There's a clear difference.
You should talk to the people in Dresden, but you can't because they're dead.
Oh my God. You should talk to the people in Dresden, but you can't because they're dead. What a line there. And the entire crowd is just gasping like, oh, she doesn't know that that Britain was bombing civilian targets in Germany. Unbelievable, the ignorance that she displayed there.
Hey, Ben Shapiro, I just had a quick question for you. So
I have a question. Can I see your face, or is it like prohibited?
I just don't want to associate my face with like my politics.
Is there a reason for that?
I just don't want like worried about my career. Is that okay?
Well, it depends about what you're about to say.
Okay, so can I just ask it?
You can ask it, and then we'll determine whether you are a person who should not be able to get a job.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So I just want to know, how hard was it to like generate like AI generated images of Hamas?
So you should take off your mask now, because, not really because what you're saying is so anti-Semitic, but just because what you're saying is so unbelievably stupid that I hope employers take a good stock of a person who does something so dumb. So
over the last couple of weeks, I've heard you make multiple justifications for the carnage, the death, the despair, the now over 10,000 Palestinian people that have been slaughtered, refugee camps that have been bombed with one-ton bombs, US-made bombs, people picking up the body parts of their children and putting them in bags because they can't find every bit of their family's remains. And you have made the justification that it's worth it if Hamas is wiped out. I want to do a thought experiment for the audience. You push a button right now, Hamas is gone from the earth. Call it whatever you want, it's gone. What do Israeli-Palestinian relations look like?
So the answer is that
No, I'm going to tell you the answer.
Well, then that's not a question.
No, that was my framing of the question.
At a certain point,
the
as long
answer-
as you get to a question mark at the end, we're good.
There's a question.
Okay. Sometime in the near future.
What does the West Bank look like? Who administers the West Bank?
I got the question.
It's the Palestinian Authority who cooperates. They're docile. They work with the Israeli government.
In what way?
And what do you see in the West Bank? Day in, day out, ethnic cleansing. People getting kicked out of their homes. In the middle of the night, the Israeli Defense Force.
Is
the
there a
Orwellian, listen.
Okay.
There
No,
are
I know.
questions coming very soon, sir. I appreciate your time. Listen. People being pulled out of their homes, watching their homes demolished while their children cry.
Where's the question?
The question is, do Palestinians have the right to defend themselves?
So can I ask a quick counter question? If by Palestinians defending themselves, is Hamas a terrorist group?
Sure.
Should Hamas surrender tomorrow?
It's not for me to say.
Okay, so
Should Israel stop dropping one-ton
hold on a second.
No.
No. You got to talk for several minutes and spew complete bullshit. So now it's my turn. So because that's how this works. This is a dialogue. No, so let me explain. Okay. Here is my perspective. My perspective on this is very clear, which is that what is happening right now in Gaza is horrific and a tragedy, and every ounce of blood that is being spilled is on Hamas. Hamas initiated this conflict. There was a ceasefire all the way up till October 6th. On October 7th, they stormed into Israel, murdered 1,500 people, and took 200 people hostage back into Gaza. They then planted themselves in terror tunnels that they've spent billions of dollars building, that they robbed from their own population, underneath civilian populations, including the Al-Shifa hospital. They have hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel underneath Al-Shifa hospital being used solely and completely to fund their terrorism. And you say Hamas should not surrender. Now here's the deal. The minute Hamas surrenders, the bloodshed stops. It is that simple. As far as the Palestinian Authority has on its books laws that pay terrorists who kill Jews. They do get actual stipends that outgross the actual yearly earnings of Palestinians. Don't shake your head at me when what you're saying is factually untrue. So, what is going to happen next after Hamas is gone? The answer very much depends on whether the Palestinians ever decide to put in place a government that is willing to not attempt to genocidally exterminate the Jews. Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip in 2005 completely. There were no Jews in the Gaza Strip in 2006.
The United Nations Security Council still considers them an effective occupier when they control the ports, the air spaces, all the territorial
Okay, so number
land.
one, you have to control...
They're incorrect on that fact.
On what
you're
fact?
presenting as a fact.
On
It's
what
not a
fact? They did pull out.
They pulled out physically, but they
but not mentally or emotionally.
No.
Okay.
I just explained how they did pull out.
As far as the ports, as far as the airspace, of course they have to prevent the shipment in of weaponry. Why? Because every single dollar that went into the Gaza Strip was used to build the greatest terror base on planet Earth, and we're watching the consequences of that right this very instant. Israel has complete air superiority over the Gaza Strip. If Israel truly wanted to commit human rights violation, they could literally turn the place into glass tomorrow. They are not doing that.
Listen to me. The West Bank. explain the settlements. Is that Hamas's fault?
First, okay, so first you need to, so first, can we finish with are we done with Gaza? We're done with Gaza. So now we're moving to the West Bank.
I'm not going to separate them fully, no.
Of course you're not going to separate them fully because you won't even say that Hamas should surrender.
I'm not in charge of Hamas.
That's such a ridiculous answer.
I'm not.
You're not in charge of Israel either, but you're dictating policy.
That's right.
Goodbye.
Goodbye and good riddance. Another great job by Ben Shapiro there. And I think that maybe he got a little bit emotional, and this is understandably, this is right after October 7th. So, he's obviously very angry that there are people that don't want Hamas to surrender. But again, the idea that that Palestinian Authority is incredibly peaceful, that's how this guy represented the Palestinian Authority. Oh, it's just a peacenik organization looking to work hand in hand with Israel. No, that's not what they are at all. In fact, they pay people to kill Israelis and Jews every single day.
So if your entire argument, once again, is predicated on terror groups, what response do you have about the Great March of Return, which is a very well-documented incident where peacefully Palestinian civilians just marched to their own land that they have a right to go and return to, but they were killed, shot at, and murdered in cold blood?
What year are we talking about? Which group are we talking about? I need more specificity.
I'm talking about the Great March of Return.
I know I'm asking for more specificity because I'm unaware of all the details of what you're speaking about.
So the Great March of Return is a well-documented instance where many Palestinians, after a tweet by a Palestinian, encouraged other Palestinians to go march peacefully back to their land.
Which land is theirs? What are we talking
We're
about?
talking about occupied Palestine.
Are you talking about in proper Israel? Where are we talking about? Like which areas?
We're talking about on the borders of Palestine, and we're also talking about their right to return to Palestine.
There is no right to return. If you're talking about in Palestine, if you're talking about the land that is inside the 67 borders, there is no right of return to Haifa. There's no right of return to Tel Aviv. There's no right of return to West Jerusalem.
So you have to remember that there are many, many, many elders who are older than the state of Israel. You have to remember that Palestine is not a Muslim land. You are equating this to a religious conflict. It's not. When Palestine, before it was occupied, you had Jews, Christians, and Muslims peacefully coexisting. Palestine is not a Muslim.
No, that is a lie. Actually, in 1929, before even the state of Israel was established, there were multiple pogroms against Jews in Hebron, in which thousands of people, I mean, maybe not in that one specific instance, but thousands of people, their homes were burnt, their people were killed. These are Jews that were killed before the state of Israel. So no, it wasn't peaceful before Israel was created.
Homeland. It's a land that existed where many people that are alive to this day are older than the state of Israel.
So are you making the argument that any population of any time, all of their descendants now have a right to go back to the place that their great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers went?
Not great-great-great-grandfather. We have grandmothers.
Okay, grandmothers, grandfathers. Is that the idea that you can walk across the lines of any sovereign state and simply claim the place that you said that you had, even though you never established property rights and say the Jordanian West Bank, or you abandon this place in Haifa? So your claim is that right now people get to walk across the border of a sovereign nation and simply set up shop in Haifa? This is your claim?
So so even if we were to buy what you're saying, which is obviously not true, I encourage you to Google about the Great
She's so condescending.
March of Return, which was a peaceful resistance against the wrongful occupation of Palestine. Even if you were to buy what you were
Can you just define wrongful occupation? Which part of Palestine is occupied?
You're not answering my question.
I mean, I'd like you to answer mine.
Terror groups. I gave you an example of peaceful resistance.
Yes.
I'll give you an example where people were wrongfully shot at, including children, and you still can't answer about why that's justified.
So, if again,
You keep talking about Hamas and terror groups, and you gave examples of other terror groups, even though I gave you examples of civilians who marched and were shot at. But even now, a few days ago, you had Palestinian people living in Israel proper, which is occupied Palestine, who are being shot at by farmers in their gardens and in their farms. And those people are being able to get away with shooting them with total impunity. So why is it that
that's not true. Many of those people have been arrested. They're all currently sitting in Israeli jail.
The settler that just shot at a Palestinian
Have been
farmer
arrested.
was not arrested. I encourage you to look into this.
I did look into this morning. And can I please get one answer before you leave? Because this is an interesting conversation. Which part of Israel is occupied Palestine?
All of Israel.
There we go. There we go. There we go. So what you're calling for is the obliteration of the state of Israel, and all of this is just a cover for that. I appreciate your time.
Every single time. It has nothing to do with freeing the Gazans. It has to do with destroying the Jewish state and making it into a Palestine. None of these people are realistic about actually, creating a state called Palestine, because they're telling Israel, well, our negotiating terms are, we want you to completely destroy yourself and become Palestine. That's their whole negotiating terms, like completely dismantle the state of Israel and basically stop occupying Palestine, as they say. And obviously that's not trying to negotiate, but rather to perpetuate this conflict for as long as possible. Oh, this is a great debate of Ben Shapiro versus the black woman on Jubilee, who believes that Israel is actually nuclear bombing the Palestinians.
Do you think that the United States has, in any way, shape, or form, not shown that they are not in support of Israel? I mean, one of Kamala Harris's talking points is every time she starts that, she believes that Israel has the right to defend itself.
I mean, so just this week, the Biden administration put forward an open threat to embargo arms to Israel earlier this year.
Because
there was
of
a national
why?
embargo against Israel.
Because of why?
Well, I mean, they're claiming that it's because of lack of humanitarian aid in the northern Gaza
Yes,
Strip. That can be their claim. I don't actually. Okay. Anybody who claims that there's a genocide going on in the Gaza Strip does not understand the definition of the word
Don't
genocide.
tell me what's the definition of genocide.
A systematic destruction of every member of a population.
Is Israel's system?
No.
Are they on their way to completing and fulfilling a genocide?
No, there are two
potentially, if they kept on going the same way that they're doing, could they completely eradicate the Gaza Strip?
Israel has the military capacity to do that, and they have certainly not done that. And the reason I can say they have not done that is you know how long it would take them at the current rate to do that, especially given the fact that they are completely targeting terrorists.
Are they completely targeting terrorists? Are children terrorists? Are the children the dead babies?
Targeting
the kids?
Civilian collateral damage is not the same thing as targeting civilians.
But is that not a byproduct of genocide?
No, that is not. Genocide is where you systematically destroy a population specifically because you wish to kill the civilian population. That is it.
He's right. That's not very pro-life.
Well, it turns out that Hamas is not pro-life when they hide behind children
and
and women.
neither is Israel when they drop bombs and nukes on Palestinian villages and families.
Are you suggesting that Israel is using nuclear weapons?
Is a bomb automatically nuclear?
No, not even remotely.
So that's what I said, a bomb.
Israel uses as small munitions as possible to target specific terrorists. Okay, they do this using drone technology.
I'm sorry. She asked him what? She asked him that if Israel's dropping nukes on Palestinians, she asked him if bombs and nukes are the exact same thing. She thought that a bomb is a nuke automatically. So when people said, "Oh, we're gonna let Iran get a nuclear bomb or not get a nuclear bomb," what did she think? She thought that all bombs were the same and they just didn't have a bomb yet? They didn't have a bomb? Like, with all the people talking about nuclear bombs, she didn't even know what a nuclear bomb looked like. She thought it was just a regular bomb. She's having this unbelievable realization now that actually bombs and nukes are not the same thing.
Have to go through 4 layers of legal before any strike is actually approved by the upper layers of the Israeli government. I've seen this actual process in action. I've seen the actual footage at Palmachim Air Force Base in which Israel goes through the process and shows exactly how they have to go through multiple legal steps in order to green light a hit on a terrorist. And they have they've released footage of this, them calling off particular strikes if they believe that the minimal amount of civilian casualty damage cannot be maintained. So the basic idea, again, what you're talking about here is a population of 2 million Palestinians who are living in the Gaza Strip. The total number of war dead at this point, according to best available statistics, is somewhere between 30,000 and 40,000 dead. That is not a genocide. It is a horrible, horrible war with horrible human casualties. That is not a genocide.
To your definition, which I will have to disagree with. But that brings me to my next question.
Name a war that isn't a genocide by your definition.
One that isn't a genocide?
Yes.
There's plenty of genocides. They've happened.
My point is that you don't seem to be distinguishing between the definition of a war and the definition of a genocide. You're saying that if mass casualties happen, it is necessarily a genocide. I'm saying that is not true.
Got you.
Hi, I just wanted to say that obviously Hamas...
No, you're going to want to watch this clip. This was unbelievable. This woman is defending Islamists and extremists because she believes that it's the West's fault that they're extreme to begin with.
...is evil and bad. Like, I don't support religious extremism or fundamentalism in any... Don't laugh at me, no, thank you, but... religious extremism or fundamentalism in any form. However, to me, what I'm just really confused on is why you don't support the citizens of the people living in Gaza and the West Bank, why you don't support them being able to also live inside of Israel.
Why don't I support them being able to live inside of Israel? Because they would immediately vote to destroy the state of Israel and interpolate another terrorist group like Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, endangering every Jew in the region. Everyone knows this. A single state is not a solution. It would endanger every Jewish life in the region. This is why Israel has pursued a two-state solution. It's why the international community wants a two-state solution. The only party that doesn't actually want some sort of two-state solution seems to be the Palestinian Authority, which has rejected every deal ever put in front of it, and Hamas, which is seeking to kill Jews in, by the way, a non-settlement area. That's not even an area that's controversial. That is not even a disputed area where they were murdering Jews. That was just outside the Gaza Strip. That's been Israeli territory since 1947-48.
Historically speaking, okay.
Let me ask you a quick counter question. America is a country of 330 million people. There are 1 billion Muslims across the earth. Many of them live in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and have very, very different opinions on politics and women's rights than I assume you do. You proclaim that you're secular and you don't like religious fundamentalism. How would you feel about importing, say, 300 million of those people into the United States? Would that make you feel like, is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I believe the reason that those people are, I believe the reason why they are religiously extreme is because of the conditions that they live under, because of the actions of America.
That's absurd and foolish. I'm sorry, that's absurd and foolish.
That's not absurd and foolish at all. Okay.
Yeah, and the reason that's absurd and foolish is because religious fundamentalism in the Islamic world did not begin in the year 1948. To pretend otherwise is to ignore literally all of Middle Eastern history. I mean, the fact of the matter is that since the time of Muhammad, and really since the year about 1100, when moderate Islam was pushed off to the side and the printing press was banned, the Islamic world has been replete with fundamentalism and extremism, repression of women, destruction of religious minorities or subjugation of religious minorities. All the happy talk about how everybody was living in some sort of utopian paradise where Jews were treated wonderfully is belied by the actual facts on the ground under the Ottoman Empire, under Arab-speaking empires. Again, this idea that religious fundamentalism is driven by the West is honestly, it's so narcissistic on the part of Westerners to believe that the only reason that religious Muslims believe what religious Muslims believe is because of us. I promise you, religious Muslims don't believe what they believe because of you. They believe what they believe because of what they believe. And it's a soft bigotry of low expectations to pretend that radical Muslims don't have opinions of their own. It must simply be driven by their lack of material success. That is not how the world works. People don't all think like you.
It's so unbelievably on point. It's like Muhammad goes and blows up a bus. Well, if he had maybe a few more paintings or he had a few more houses around the country, maybe he wouldn't have blown up that bus. You know, if he wasn't living in these poor living conditions, maybe he would have had a change of heart. We just have to have them all be rich and have unbelievable houses, and then they won't blow us up. That is their logic. That is their logic. And Ben did a great job there pointing out that it didn't start with Israel. It didn't start with America's influence in the region, that there was massive extremism prior to 1948 as well.
It's okay. Now let her respond, please. That's fine.
Obviously not everyone thinks like I do. However, when you are put into a situation where you, when people are backed into a corner, and they don't have proper conditions to live under, they're way more likely to resort to religious fundamentalism. They're way more likely to resort to extremism in general.
I don't disagree with that, but I will deny that that's the West's fault.
Hamas is in terms of like just the other the neighboring Arab countries, I don't think continual war and in the Middle East and, you know, all the stuff that America did in the Middle East, which I'm sure you have criticisms of, I don't think that that really helped get rid of the influence of groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, because that just... Well,
I mean, it certainly helped get rid of some of the influence of ISIS because we killed a huge number of them. But again, the notion that ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all terrorism is to blame on the West ignores all of Islamic history and the history of the region. It ignores the fact that there were Islamic invasions of Europe back in the 1300s. Again, this sort of ignorance of history that is rooted in the idea that all the forces you see today must be the result of things that America is doing or the West is doing. I don't see any evidence for that. The times, by the way, when the Arab Street has risen up, they promptly replaced more moderate dictators with things like the Muslim Brotherhood, which is exactly what happened during the so-called Arab Spring when they took over for Mohammed Morsi and promptly put in place the Muslim Brotherhood. You can keep blaming economics until the cows come home. You know what the solution to that would be, by the way? I have a solution for this. If what you're saying is right, I have a solution for this. Here's the solution. In 2005, Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is an area that is less population dense than both Singapore and Hong Kong. Hundreds of millions, nay, billions of dollars flowed into the Gaza Strip. If people there, and Hamas in particular, really wanted to develop the lives of their citizens and make them better, they could have, and they should. And yet I see very little demand for that. At a certain point, people are going to have to take responsibility for their own actions and stop blaming America and the West for making shitty decisions. I appreciate it.
Ben is 100% on point here, and I'll tell you why. He is hitting on the woke ideology, and that is that anybody that does something bad, we assume they did it only because of something else. So we say, okay, criminal commits a crime. Oh, it must be that the system itself is terrible. The system itself pushed them to commit that crime, and therefore it's not their fault. We shouldn't be blaming them, but rather we should be blaming the system and tear down the system. Similarly, with other terrible things like Hamas and the Palestinians, people would say, okay, Hamas and Palestinians committed October 7th. But it's not their fault. Let's not blame them. Let's actually blame Israel because it was an open-air prison, and therefore they just had to commit October 7th. They had no choice. And then you get into a very, very dark place where you're conflating good with evil and evil with good.
American Jew, how can you continue to condone the actions of the Israeli government, condoned by the U.S. government, in the Gaza Strip, where over 40,000 people have died, including Palestinians and Israelis, and large numbers of children and civilians? How can you continue to condone those actions?
Okay, hold on. I want to correct you. I don't just condone the actions of the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli government. I celebrate and laud them. I'm not morally apathetic about what's happening. On October 7th, Hamas launched the most deadly war on Jews since the Holocaust. They killed 1,200 innocent people. They took 250 hostages. 100 of them are still being held hostage. I know members of families of hostages who are still being held, American citizens. Hamas could end this war today by surrendering. They've chosen not to surrender. Instead, they spent billions of dollars building terror tunnels below civilian areas. It is not incumbent on the Israeli government to surrender just because terrorists are evil enough to hide behind civilians. The Israeli government has gone through such extraordinary efforts not to kill civilians that it has managed the best civilian to terrorist kill ratio in the history of urban warfare, and it is not close. I personally know soldiers who have gone door to door in the Gaza Strip who have risked their own lives to prevent civilian death. Israel has complete and utter air superiority over the Gaza Strip. Turns out that Hamas doesn't have an air force. They just had a series of tunnels where they hid all their leadership while their people suffered after their people voted for them, and then they effectively established a dictatorship over the course of the last 20 years. Israel, with their complete air superiority, certainly would have had the ability to commit full-scale human atrocities had they wanted to. They have complete air superiority. They could have used F-35s and simply turned the place into a parking lot. They did not, in fact, do that. They moved vast scales of population. In fact, believe it or not, there have been more births in the Gaza Strip since the beginning of this war than there have been deaths in the Gaza Strip from the war itself. That is a very poor way to conduct a genocide. Israel is being more meticulous in the conduct of this war than any army in human history, and certainly than the United States Army in its vast role in the history of urban combat. That is uncontested. What is Israel supposed to do? Simply say that you get to play tag, you take Israeli citizens, you kill 1,200 people, you hide behind a baby, you hide behind a civilian, and now Israel has to preemptively surrender? That is a great way to make sure that terrorists always win. What Israel has done ought to be celebrated by the Western world because they've demonstrated that if terrorists decide to launch a war they cannot win, they will be eviscerated from the face of the earth as they ought to be.
Do you not want ceasefire now?
I do not want a ceasefire until Hamas is destroyed and all the...
He asked that after Ben literally went on this tear about how he doesn't want this war to end. He wants the Hamas destroyed. Do you not want ceasefire? Like, obviously not.
Hostages are back. I want... And you know how that could happen? It could have happened October 6th. There was a ceasefire on October 6th. And then there wasn't a ceasefire starting on October 7th. And there could have been a ceasefire again on October 8th, even after all of the death. If Hamas had surrendered its top leadership to international justice, if it had released all of its hostages, and if it had turned over its rulership of the Gaza Strip to some sort of decent body that wouldn't have reinstalled terrorism at the top of the food chain. I mean, what exactly is the excuse for Hezbollah getting involved in the war? Hezbollah isn't even in Israel. Hezbollah has nothing to do with Israeli territory, and they've been launching 8,000 rockets between October 7th and now. Now it's more like 12,000 or 13,000 rockets, hundreds of them every week. What is the justification for that? There is only one way to defeat terrorism, and that is to win. You do not win wars with ceasefires. You do not win wars by losing.
In your speech, you mentioned that there are scavengers who like to tear down and there are lions who like to build up. Are there not some institutions we ought to tear down in society, potentially like the Israeli Defense Force?
I think it would be an act of the gravest evil to even make that contention, simply because the Israeli Defense Force stands between 7.5 million Jews in Israel and complete slaughter. And by the way, over 2 million Arabs and complete slaughter who are citizens of the state of Israel. The only security and peace in the region right now is being guaranteed by the Israeli military. That is the only force standing between that region and continued chaos. The destruction of the IDF is the destruction of Israel. That means a genocide, a true genocide. The thing that everybody likes to ignore in the Middle East while they're claiming genocide and while they are claiming apartheid is that there's only one area in that specific area that is free of one ethnicity and religion, and it is quote-unquote Palestine, which has 0 Jews living in it. If you drive through the West Bank, there are giant red signs if you drive into the Palestinian Authority areas saying Jews are not allowed in here. And if you drive there without the permission of the Israeli government as a Jew, you will be killed. If you're a Palestinian and you accidentally make your way into Israel, nothing will happen to you. You will go back to Nablus in the evening. If you make it through the checkpoint accidentally, you'll go back. And if you're a Jew and you accidentally drive into Ramallah, you will not emerge alive. That is not, if we are talking about which force here is a force for good and which force here is a force for evil, there is no question what the distinction is. If we're going to talk about institutions that ought to be torn down, we should start with the legacy media, which seems to have radically misinformed you.
Yeah, this guy seems like he was even trolling, because Ben Shapiro laid out exactly what his opinion was, and he kept on asking him more questions that were obvious. Like, oh, do you think we should dismantle the IDF? To Ben Shapiro. Like, obviously he's going to say no. I mean, maybe he's just trying to piss him off.
Hi, Ben. With Israel giving the 2 million population of Gaza only 24 hours to complete an evacuation that would take 72 hours at the least, according to the UN, then bombing the escape routes, how can you continue to push the narrative that the IDF, as well as Israel, cares about the Palestinian citizens? According to the UN Human Rights Commission, 6 million Palestinians have been displaced since 1950, and recently 2,700 to 3,500 killed. Given those figures, how can you defend the actions of the IDF? Because they clearly are not just killing Hamas/active combatants.
They're attempting to kill Hamas/active combatants. And the way that I know that is because Hamas keeps hiding civilians on top of the active combatants. If Hamas thought that Israel was simply going to target civilians and they wanted to save their own civilians, theoretically, they would not put their rockets in fucking apartment buildings. Okay, one of the things that drives me absolutely up a wall is this notion that Hamas itself knows that Israel is attempting to stop civilian casualties. There are tapes of Israel literally calling people standing outside buildings who work for Hamas, telling them, get the civilians out of the building, we're about to hit the building, and the Hamas guy saying, I don't want to get the people out of the building. And the IDF soldier saying, get them out or they're going to die. He says, I want them to die. Hamas is open about this. They're not hiding this. As far as the UN Human Rights Council, the most useless organization in the history of mankind, who have nothing. I've noticed the peculiar absence of the UN Human Rights Council every time a Jew gets slaughtered in a massacre like we saw just a couple of weeks ago. Not a shock there, because the UN is the Mos Eisley of international politics, a wretched hive of scum and villainy. But the fact is that Israel, by the way, has not just offered 24 hours. They've now offered, 2 weeks? I mean, the fact is that Israel still has not started its ground invasion. It's nearly 2 weeks after the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. Israel's been providing exact maps to people to get out. It's Hamas. There's actual aerial footage of Hamas trucks blocking the exit routes from these places to stop people from leaving. In fact, Israel even turned back on the water in the south of the Gaza Strip in order to try and drive civilians south. Okay, the notion that Israel is not trying to minimize civilian casualties is so belied by every possible fact. It's insane. I've been there and I've seen the footage of the IAF stopping hits on certain areas because they're afraid that it'll maximize civilian casualties if they hit it. As I mentioned before, Al-Shifa Hospital, every single person knows that Hamas headquarters is located under Al-Shifa Hospital. Why hasn't Israel bombed it? Because it's a hospital. Israel doesn't want to bomb hospitals. There's only one party in this conflict that cares about Gazan civilians, and it is not Hamas.
He touched on a very important point there. If you would have noticed, he said, why do you think Hamas builds tunnels? Why do you think Hamas creates infrastructure under civilian population centers? Why do you think they do that? It's because they know that Israel can't attack them if they're around civilians. They're using civilians as human shields, 100%. And then people will then say, oh, Israel is deliberately targeting civilians. That argument is so unbelievably easy to debunk because Hamas uses a human shield and uses civilians against Israel. If it knew that Israel didn't care about civilian casualties, then it wouldn't do that. This is another debate at the Oxford Union that he had. It also got pretty heated.
The occupation of Palestine.
The whole thing, right? Just to be clear?
The entirety of Palestine.
Thank you.
You may accuse me of genocide if you wish. That is not my position.
Sure. And I will, but go ahead.
Anyway, so the point about the occupation of Palestine, you have released multiple videos. You have essentially made yourself the cheerleader of Israel in a lot of sort of Western media spaces. So I watched some of your videos about the conflict, and I found a number of inaccuracies. First of all, you describe in 1920, you refer to Jordan as part of Palestine historically. That has never been the case. There has never been a state of Jordan.
British Mandate Palestine, yes.
That is still not the case. Jordan has never been part or considered part of Palestine. The only time that Jordan has been considered adjacent to Palestine is part of sort of biblical mythology where Transjordan was a reason.
That's wildly inaccurate. The British mandate had a mandate over all of Palestine, and then they separated off Transjordan and handed it to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
You will get your chance to reply. Let me finish. Now, the second point that you have phrased constantly and consistently, and it's quite a popular Zionist talking point, is the fact that the Arabs have rejected peace every time it was offered to them. Now, I would like, of course, there's been multiple times where peace has been offered, so let's discuss some of them. The Peel Commission. The Peel Commission entailed expelling multiple Arab families and multiple Arab communities, largely agrarian, from the land in order to create a Jewish state under a colonial authority. Now, I understand, of course, you are a Zionist, so you believe that's desirable. But for the Palestinian farmers, I can imagine they would not have enjoyed that. Number two, you mentioned that that after 1948, the Arabs had the chance to negotiate and make peace with Israel. Apart from the fact that in 1956, Israel invaded the Sinai in Egypt, unprovoked, purely due to the fact that President Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Then you claim that the 1967 war was a war of extermination. But if you will read any trusted and respected historian over the 1967 war, and perhaps you may even decide to read some of the books of Moshe Dayan about the actual conflict, where he describes that Israel actually provoked the conflict and there was no chance of the extermination of Israel. Then you claim that the 1973 war was a war of the destruction of Israel once again, which it was not. It was actually the reclaiming of the Sinai and the Golan Heights, which Israel has illegally occupied. So, you have lied multiple times. I can continue if you would wish, but I would like to ask you the question. When you lie, do you feel shame?
Okay, so in order for me to feel shame, I would have to be lying as opposed to you just being wrong about all of these things which you are. So let me start from the very beginning of what you said. Let's try to go through the calendar. British Mandate Palestine was ruled by the British. They carved off Transjordan in 1920, and Transjordan was made into Transjordan with the Hashemite Kingdom, which, by the way, is not domestic to the actual Arab Jordan. So if you're talking about a colonial outpost, Jordan would be it, since the Hashemite Kingdom has nothing to do with the actual Palestinian Arabs who are living in Transjordan. Talking about the Peel Commission. If the idea is that there would have to be a separation of populations in order to effectuate a two-state solution, which you deny, then I was right. Of course, there was a deal on the table. The Jews accepted it. The Arabs rejected it. So you did not actually undermine my case.
In his diary states.
Hold on. I listened to your whole bullshit history for like 5 minutes here. So at least let me respond to it. Your entire claim is that the Arabs did not reject peace, and then in your own disquisition, you admitted that the Arabs rejected the Peel Commission plan, which was a separation between the Jews and the Arabs, which gave an extraordinary amount of land to the Arabs. The Arabs then rejected the peace partition plan proposed by the United Nations in 1947. They then proceeded to reject the Oslo Accords in 93. After that, they rejected the Wye River Accords in 98. They rejected Ehud Barak's very generous offer in 2000. They rejected Olmert's. very generous offer in 2008. Every single peace deal that has been proposed by Israel or anyone else has been rejected by the Arabs for a very simple reason, which was the very first question I asked you. You do not accept that there should be a Jewish state anywhere in this region. So as long as that's the case, there's literally nothing to argue about. You cannot simultaneously maintain the position there should not be a Jewish state anywhere in the region and then tell me that I'm wrong when I say that the Arabs will not accept a two-state solution. You yourself say that there should not be a two-state solution.
So the first point I'll firstly address the last point that you made about the Palestine and whether there should be a Jewish state. The point you are making there is you're suggesting that the Arabs will not accept a Jewish state. Well, the reason that the Arabs would not accept the Jewish state is multifaceted.
It's complex.
Let me finish. So, the reason that it's multifaceted is due to a variety of dynamics. The Zionist movement arrived as a settler colonial project, and it is described as that. You can read the books of Jablonski. You can read Zionist literature from the early 20th century. It states that it was a colonial project. Now let's address the lies that you mentioned. Let's address the refutation that you made. In 1937, the Peel Commission, if you read the diaries of David Ben-Gurion, he explicitly states that the partition was a temporary move to ensure the conquest of the full land. In 1948, there had already been an intercommunal civil war in Palestine, which had seen Jewish defense forces versus the Arab forces. There was already a conflict that preceded 1948. To claim that the Arabs simply rejected the UN partition plan is once again ahistorical. You then make...
They literally rejected it. How could it be ahistorical if they literally rejected it?
If there was a war beforehand...
And once again, you just reject fundamentally the existence of the state of Israel, period. So how can...
to interrupt you, I was told to silence. So I would ask you again, please shut up. My point now, I would like to continue. And you then mention the... what was the peace plan you mentioned after...
Okay, which one should we do? Should we do the...
We finished 1948. What after?
Okay, so there was the 2000 peace plan from Ehud Barak. There's the 2008 peace plan from Ehud Olmert. There's the pullout of Israel from Gaza Strip in 2005, handing it over to Hamas.
Let's get the next person up now.
All right. Thank you very much.
Listen, I mean, this guy knows his history, sort of, whatever, but he's trying to claim that there was a credible Palestinian peace movement. That's his claim, that they're willing to accept a Jewish state. 100% false, and it's easily refutable just based on the fact that he himself is saying that he doesn't accept a two-state solution. He himself is saying that from the river to the sea, he wants Palestine free. All of their chants, they referred to the entirety of so-called Palestine, destroying the entire Israel. And when you're in a negotiation, you're not going to tell somebody, no, there's nothing to negotiate. We just want the whole thing. We just want you gone. That's not a negotiation. That's saying that I want you to destroy you. And so that's not looking for peace. In fact, it's looking for war.
But the Gaza death toll is now reported to be over 5,000. Almost half of the population of Gaza is under the age of 18, and those are statistics that have been supported by the WHO and Save the Children. Israel has recently turned off the electricity, water supply, and you've spoken about this issue about Israel and Palestine a lot in recent interviews. You've rightly condemned the atrocities that occurred on October 7th to innocent Israeli civilians. I tried to find videos of you condemning the deaths of innocent Palestinian civilians at the hands of the IDF or Israel, but I couldn't find any.
Right, because I don't draw moral equivalence.
I just wanted to ask you directly, will you condemn the deaths of innocent Palestinian civilians in the same way that you do innocent Israeli ones?
Absolutely not. And the reason I will not is because the killing is not done in the same way or with the same purpose. That's like saying that do I condemn? That's like saying, will I condemn the person who murders a baby in their bed by burning them alive the same way that I condemn the police officer who's trying to arrest that person and accidentally kill someone in the process? Of course not. Those are not the same thing, not remotely.
But there have been innocent... do you not sympathize with the life of an innocent Palestinian child?
Of course I do. That's why
way?
Hamas should surrender today. Hamas should surrender today. This bullshit that it's Israel's responsibility to protect Gazan civilians in a way that Hamas doesn't have to protect Gazan civilians, or that what's happening right now is not the result of Hamas's terrorism and currently holding over 200 hostages, including babies, in custody. That's insane. Trying to draw a moral equivalence between people who are making targeted strikes against terrorists, who are hiding underground in tunnels deliberately, violating international law, in violation of the Geneva Conventions, holding the other side civilians underneath the ground while not providing their own people fuel, not providing them food, not providing them medicine. and that I'm supposed to equate Israel attempting to make targeted strikes with Hamas literally sending 2,000 terrorists across another nation's border and into civilian areas with no military goal, with purely the goal of murdering those civilians? I don't. Let me ask you. Why exactly would you equate?
I'm asking you questions
well,
here,
I mean,
Mr.
you got
Shapiro.
several questions, so I'm asking. Honestly, I'm going to ask you the same question. Why would you?
I'm asking you the questions here. I find it really concerning that you're not prepared.
Why? Why won't you answer the question?
I find it really concerning that you're not prepared to condemn, to even admit that it's sad when an innocent Palestinian child dies.
Of course it's sad. I just said it's sad.
In the same way that it's sad when an innocent Israeli civilian dies.
Of course it's
Why are those two not equally saddening to you?
Honestly, I think this is a stupid question because he's Jewish and he has an affinity for Israel. So when an Israeli or a Jew dies in Israel, obviously that's more sad to him than a Palestinian, which is essentially like an enemy to him.
I'm of course incredibly sad when anybody who's innocent dies, but it is not the same evil when somebody murders a baby in their crib as when someone tries to kill a terrorist and that terrorist is hiding behind the baby. That's not the same thing.
But innocent Palestinian children have lost their lives.
Of course they have, and Hamas should be blamed for all of that, and Hamas should surrender today. Will you call on Hamas to surrender?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then we're in agreement. Great.
Okay. I'd now like to go with Trevor.
Thank you, and may I first say thank you for coming to speak at the Oxford Union this evening. It's a real pleasure. I'm a theology student myself, and I was wondering, how do you reconcile your conservative political views?
Say into the microphone.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile your conservative political views with the religious values of compassion and your own Jewish faith? And your stance on the Israeli-Palestine war?
I don't see why it's uncompassionate to call for the overthrow of Hamas, a terrorist group in the Gaza Strip, which has been oppressing its people and stealing billions of dollars from its own people. Ismail Haniyeh is living in a 5-star hotel in Qatar while his people are living in absolute misery because of a war that he initiated by killing 1,500 people inside Israel proper and then taking 233 hostages. I don't see why that's non-compassionate. It seems to me that compassion also requires that you obliterate terrorist threats to your own population.
Thank you. I'll go to the member in the corner here.
Ben Shapiro, why don't you just roll over and die? Why don't you roll over and die? That's what this guy is saying. Like, why do you support and again, remember, this is right after October 7th. This isn't, a few months after. This isn't, maybe a year after. This isn't where we are today, about like a year or 2 years after. This is right after, a few weeks after October 7th, and he's being asked, so how do you reconcile being Jewish and supporting this war? Because it's so evil what Israel is doing. Right after October 7th, they're asking these types of questions.
Hi, Ben.
Howdy.
So over the last couple of weeks, you've been making this point that there's no moral equivalency between what Hamas did on October 7 and what Israel's response has been. But do you think there is a point at which the civilian death toll no longer justifies the actions of Israel, or do you think that alternatively Israel can justifiably kill every last civilian as long as its goal is to destroy Hamas?
So Israel should do its best to avoid killing civilians in destroying Hamas. However, there is no number where it goes from every life obviously being valuable. There's no number, however, where it goes from 10,000 to 10,001, at which point it has entered the realm of disproportion. That's not how war works. If war worked that way, no one would ever win one. It also completely destroys, I talked about incentive structures, it destroys the incentive structure for military units to act in ways that do not put civilian lives in danger, to allow Hamas immunity by dint of the fact that they are deliberately hiding among civilian populations. If you actually want people to not hide among civilian populations, then there have to be serious penalties to those groups for doing that sort of thing. Providing a ceasefire to the terrorist group as they hide under the ground is precisely the reverse of that.
But do you not realize that in using Hamas's disregard for civilian life to justify Israel's action, you are establishing the same equivalency that you are rejecting?
Please explain.
If you say that Hamas is hiding behind civilians, therefore we have a right to go after Hamas, despite the fact that we will get a lot of civilians in the way. You're using the fact that your enemy is evil to justify your own evil actions.
No, I'm lamenting the fact that the enemy is evil. That's a different thing. I'm lamenting the fact that Hamas is hiding beneath civilians, and I'm suggesting that if Israel has to get done what it has to get done, that lies with Hamas. That's not, it's not, the death of civilians here is unjustifiable across the board, but is blameworthy on Hamas's part. There's a difference between death being justifiable in these circumstances in the sense that it's ever morally praiseworthy or good, and where you place the blame for that death. I mean, that's a pretty obvious moral point. And to suggest that it's somehow a celebration of the death of civilians to point out that Hamas is hiding beneath them is to miss the point entirely. The entire point is that it's horrifying what Hamas is doing. If Hamas wants to end this all today, all they have to do is surrender. That's literally all they have to do. They have to walk out of the tunnels with their arms up and hand the hostages back to the Israelis, and this all goes away literally tomorrow. So all of this moral heartburn that people are having over Israel attempting to destroy a terrorist group that just murdered 1,500 civilians in their beds, including babies burned alive in ovens. The heartburn over that, because Hamas has simultaneously mistreated its own citizens, and so that's somehow Israel's responsibility. So Israel has to allow its own civilians to be put at risk because Hamas is deliberately putting its civilians at risk. Hamas is the governing body in the Gaza Strip. They've robbed their own citizens blind to the tune of billions of dollars. They have a $500 million investment portfolio in real estate around the globe, while 80% of their citizens are living in poverty. They took all the water pipes out of the ground and carved them into rockets. And somehow Israel is supposed to stop from deposing them because they're so cruel to their own civilians? That logic doesn't work in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You gave him a little head nod there. You got me. One thing to point out there that Ben was saying, and I think this is encapsulated in a quote by, I believe it was the only female prime minister of Israel, Golda Meir. She said, "We can forgive the Palestinians for killing our children, but we can never forgive them for making us kill their children, for making us kill them." That is a very poignant quote. I'm not sure I agree with it, but her point was the crime that Hamas is responsible for is not only October 7th. The crime is after October 7th, not being manly enough to fight a war or surrender or give up the hostages, and instead choosing the route of cowardice and hiding under their children. Imagine this. Guy goes and murders somebody. Terrible. That's absolutely terrible. But what's even worse than that, and I think that you'll understand this very well, is them going behind their own wife and children, putting them in front of their face as a human shield, using their family as human shield. That is a way and far worse crime than going and committing the murder to begin with.
We have time for one more question, and we'll go back corner over there, please.
My question is going to be about the Israel-Palestine issue, and let it be known that I'm not a big from the river to the sea kind of person. My question is about your claim about Israel always having its doors open to peace for a two-state solution, and I just don't think this narrative is true. I don't think that any Israeli prime minister since Yitzhak Rabin has really had their doors open for peace. And Yitzhak Rabin, the most open for peace Israeli prime minister of all time, was shot by an Israeli extremist who was motivated by Jewish fundamentalism, which as a Jew I find really appalling that was the closest we've ever got to peace, and it was our very own religious fundamentalists that stopped that from happening. I don't think that Israel does currently have its doors open for peace. Benjamin Netanyahu has made his voice opposed to the two-state solution very often. Israel is under the control of a minority settler population who are not willing to give up on the land of Judea and Samaria, which is land that needs to be given up in order to achieve peace. So I just don't think this is true. And yes, I don't think Hamas has its doors open for peace either. But this does not change the fact that Israel is culpable for also this current situation.
Hold on. So he's saying the Palestinians and the Palestinian leadership don't want peace. They just want to destroy Israel. But Israel should then go ahead and be open to peace. That's his argument. That Israel should want to make peace with individuals that want to destroy them. What? What? You admit there's no Palestinian partner for peace, but you insist that Israel should then say, okay, regardless of the fact that these people want to kill us, let's give them more land. That's a genius idea. You give your enemies more land. Maybe they'll start liking you more. Or, more likely, and actually we've seen this happen, is when you give your enemy land, they take that land and they say, what a cuck this guy is. What a pathetic individual. We said we want to destroy him, and then he gave us land. Let's continue saying that, and we'll get more land until he has no more land left for himself, and we'll destroy him entirely. That is what this guy is proposing. He's obviously a leftist Jew.
In which it is not willing to negotiate because it views the entire land as its own. Look at the nation-state law. The Judea, Samaria, Golan, everything. It's all meant to be exclusive Jewish sovereignty.
Okay, so let's talk about the history for a second. To suggest that the last Israeli prime minister who's in favor of peace was Yitzhak Rabin, I'm sorry, but it's just historically inaccurate. Shimon Peres was Yitzhak Rabin's partner in the peace plan, was prime minister. Ehud Barak, who is so far to the left that he makes Yitzhak Rabin look like a piker, was the prime minister and offered a peace deal in 2000. Ehud Olmert offered an incredibly generous peace deal, much greater even than the 2000 peace deal, rejected by Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas. So that's just historically inaccurate. The idea that Yitzhak Rabin was simply willing, even at the time, this is not even what the Oslo Accords say. The Oslo Accords really kind of embody some of the things that I was saying about a gradualistic process of surrender of some parts of the land, which is why you still have areas A, B, and C. When it comes to the idea that Israel as a whole is somehow culpable for a terrorist group that calls for its extermination, running into its center and murdering 1,500 Jews is deeply immoral. That's deeply immoral. You're not talking about people who are arguing in favor of some sort of land for peace settlement. The people who ran in are arguing for the extirpation of every Jew from the region. Every Jew. And as far as the idea that Israel is somehow ethnically intolerant as opposed to its neighbors, that's untrue as well. Israel is 20% Arab. Gaza has 0 Jews, 0. The Palestinian Authority has 0 Jews living under its authority, nor could they be trusted to have Jews living under their authority, given the fact that when Jews accidentally drive into Ramallah, they're in danger of being lynched, which is certainly not true of the tens of thousands of Palestinians who every single day are given work permits into Israel, including, by the way, people from the Gaza Strip who had work permits into Israel, some of whom then went back and gave information to Hamas on the specific locations and number of people in each house in these various moshavim, those are the villages, in the Gaza envelope. So to suggest that it's Bibi Netanyahu's fault that Hamas murdered 1,500 people, again, ignoring the fact that Hamas has been firing rockets on Israel continuously for about a 17-year period at this point, spanning governments of both the left and the right. Bibi Netanyahu wasn't even prime minister a year and a half ago. It was Yair Lapid, who was very much to the left. So to make the argument that somehow Israel has a responsibility to make a quote-unquote two-state solution with the current partners is totally crazy. Who's the partner? It would be one thing to argue if there was a liberal-minded partner that actually sought peace. But what you're talking about is a Palestinian Authority. The most liberal partner that is there is the Palestinian Authority, which right now, today, is paying Hamas terrorists a stipend for having killed Jews. Those are not people you can make a peace deal with.
This didn't come up yet in the interview, but you've been quite vocal in your criticisms of the Black Lives Matter movement, stating that all lives matter. But throughout this interview, you have not equally defended Palestinian lives, the civilian Palestinian lives, in the way that you have Israeli civilian lives. So when it comes to Israel-Palestine, do all lives not matter then?
So first off, it's a wild mischaracterization of a position that I've obviously expressed to you. You literally asked me, do I value Palestinian lives the same way I value Jewish lives? And I said, yes, I don't believe that the act of evil in targeting a Jewish child is the same as a military attempting to target a terrorist who's hiding behind a baby. So don't mistake the position, please. When it comes to the all lives matter position, of course I believe that all lives matter. My fundamental disagreement with Black Lives Matter is I don't agree with their premise. Their premise is that black people in the United States are being uniquely targeted by law enforcement for murder, and I don't think that the statistics prove that. I don't think the evidence is there for that. So I don't agree with the fundamental premise of the Black Lives Matter movement. Not that I don't believe that black lives don't matter. Of course Black Lives matter. They matter exactly the same amount as every other human life. But again, there's I think, a willful attempt to misinterpret my position on some of these issues.
Okay, thank you. And one question that we ask all of our guests who come here, if you could leave our members with one thing to think about, what would it be?
I mean, I think that tonight, the thing that I would leave with is the same thing that I came in with, which is that there are certain values that are worth protecting. There are certain values that are worth protecting. And one of those values is the value of understanding, the value of understanding clear moral differentiation, which obviously has been completely obscured. I think tonight we've seen some evidence of people obscuring some clear moral differentiation between the targeted burning of babies in their homes in front of their mothers by shoving them in an oven and people attempting to kill terrorists who are themselves putting civilians in harm's way in violation of the rules of war and the Geneva Conventions. And if you're one of the people who's making this sort of moral equivalence, I ask for you to check your own heart. And if you're one of the people who's watching people make this moral equivalence and being convinced by the supposed complexity of the issue, I ask for you to check your brain. Thank you.
Just an unbelievable job there. Coming to a close on this video. Imagine you're Ben Shapiro. The entire, about 2 years since October 7th, you've had to defend Israel. You've been called all types of names. You're probably the #1 target for anti-Semites like Tucker Carlson. Well, Candace Owens was sort of your fault because you didn't pay her enough. But Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, every single one of these guys, all of them are they're pinpointing you as the foremost Jew in their brain. You live rent-free in their head, which is kudos to you. But they're pinpointing you as the head Jew. And it is a big responsibility to bear. And I think that, although a lot of Jews might not like you, they might not agree with you, for some reason, the anti-Semites have decided that you are the representation of Jews in America. You are the guy to go after. Could be because you built such a successful empire and you managed to really make something of yourself here, but also, you're special in that sense, that a lot of people look towards you, whether they're Jewish and they're trying to look to you for inspiration or something to say to these idiots, or the anti-Semites that are obviously equating you with some kind of dual citizenship and somebody that's, not really American, not MAGA enough, not conservative enough. You're a tool of the administration. You're all these, very, very baseless identities that they throw at you. And I just think as Jews, we should recognize what he goes through on a day-to-day basis, because it's pretty bad for everybody. Just dealing with this in your head, dealing with all the guilt of being Jewish, so to speak. But he has a significant experience of being one of the foremost well-known Jews in the world. People think Jewish, people think conservative, people think Ben Shapiro. That's what it comes down to. It's not like a Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is Jewish. He's talked about October 7th, etc., but he's not who people think as the guy, the foremost Jew. He's not really, his Jewish identity, it doesn't come first because, again, he's not a religious Jew. He's not an Orthodox Jew. This is an Orthodox Jew who, when people think American Jews, conservatism, they think Ben Shapiro, and it is a massive weight that he holds every single day for us, for the Jewish people, and for Israel. And he, despite all that, has managed to keep his sanity, as well as not get too emotional in a lot of these debates, and managed to make some great arguments. I think that if I were to pick 3-4 people to go up against any of these anti-Israel advocates and pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas propagandists, I would say Ben Shapiro, Douglas Murray, Mossab Hassan Youssef, whatever. He would for sure be in my top 3 or top 5 people to go up and just call a vote. This is a Ben Shapiro appreciation post for everything he's done for the Jewish people, for Israel, and really, quite frankly, for America. Think about how many people were affected by this man. How many people became Christians because of this man, became more Jewish because of this man, became, more religiously Jewish. He's affected the lives of so many people, and quite frankly, a lot of that is because of his arguments on college campuses. He probably birthed Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk saw how well he was doing with all these college debates and decided to do it himself. He is the original college debater, guys. Look back to 2016, 2015, 2014. Ben Shapiro was the guy. And he continues to be the guy with his Daily Show and a lot of the things he's doing at the Daily Wire. And just, I disagree with him on a lot of things. I think that in some cases he's wrong, but I respect the fact that he is willing to continue to raise awareness about Israel, to continue to debunk the anti-Israel rhetoric online, despite the fact he's being, libeled and called a dual citizen and called all these names and, by everybody. Everybody attacks him. And yet he's able to stand through, take the heat, and continue to fight. To support the channel, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Jew. And that's all I have to say. Ben Shapiro, keep it up. And hopefully you guys bookmark this video and spread it around as well. For more, subscribe to the channel. If you want to help us make more of these videos, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/JewishUncensored. You can also go to our channel memberships page and join there as well. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.